Dustmere didn't care much for clever women. It was the kind of town where a man's word weighed more than the truth, and where a woman's voice was only welcome if it whispered obedience. Nestled in a forgotten corner of the frontier, where dust-covered dreams and God-fearing folks clung to tradition like a Bible in a storm, Dustmere was a place where change wasn't just unwelcome, it was punished. Elena Monroe had never fit from the moment she arrived 3 years ago. With her trunk full of books and a mind sharper than any blade, people watched her with quiet unease. She had come to teach reading, arithmetic, even the sciences, and the schoolhouse, once silent, soon echoed with curiosity. Children spoke with wonder about stars and history, and little girls started dreaming of more than marriage, and that was the problem. They called a town meeting, not to praise her but to silence her. "She's filling their heads with nonsense," said Mayor Halbridge, a red-faced man with a swollen ego and 3 daughters he kept from Elena's classroom. "Says here," he held up one of Elena's books like a snake, "this talks about evolution. That ain't God's word." The church murmured in agreement. Men nodded. Women kept their eyes low. No one stood for Elena. Elena, dressed in a simple blue dress with her copper hair tied back, stood at the front of the meeting hall. With her hands folded, her voice didn't shake. "I taught your children to think, to wonder, to question, and that's the sin," the mayor hissed. "You're a danger, Miss Whitley." By morning she was no longer Miss Whitley, the school teacher. She was Elena, the outcast, her name scraped off the school door, her belongings thrown into the dirt. As she walked down Main Street, dragging her suitcase behind her, people stared, some with pity, most with smug relief. She passed the blacksmith, who once offered her free coal in winter. He looked away. The woman from the bakery, who'd shared cherry pie with her the month before, tightened her shawl and crossed the street. Elena kept walking, head high even as her stomach knotted. What they didn't see was the man standing on the second floor of the saloon, just above the old player piano. He leaned against the railing, untouched whiskey in hand, face half shadowed by the brim of a black hat. He watched her the way a wolf watches a storm, quiet, calculating. He'd seen this before, towns that feared what they didn't understand, women punished for the crime of being more than pretty, more than quiet. When Elena disappeared over the ridge toward her cabin on the edge of town, the man didn't follow. He didn't speak, but his jaw tightened, and the glass in his hand cracked with a pop, so soft only he could hear it. That night, Elena lit a single candle in her tiny room. The books they hadn't burned sat in a pile by the bed. Her eyes stung, but she didn't cry. Instead, she took out her journal and wrote, "They said I was too smart to find love. Maybe they're right. Maybe love only comes to the obedient. Or maybe it just hasn't found me yet." Outside the desert, wind howled, and not far off in the dark beyond town, a rider sat on his horse beneath a moonless sky, watching the glow of her window. He didn't believe in much anymore, but tonight, something stirred, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, Elena stepped into Dustmere like a ghost, still clinging to the living. The town hadn't changed overnight. Same creaking signs, same clouds of dust, same clanging of horseshoes being nailed in the forge. But something in the air had shifted. People didn't greet her anymore. They glanced, then looked away. Her presence had become a stain, something unpleasant and difficult to scrub out. The children she once taught were kept inside. One boy, little Micah, peered from behind a curtain and waved before his mother yanked him back and slammed the window shut. Elena held her head high, but inside she felt the cracks spreading. She walked to the general store, hoping to buy flour. Mr. Trask, the owner, stood behind the counter polishing a glass, pretending not to see her. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Trask, could I get no credit?" he snapped without looking up. "I wasn't asking for no business either." His eyes finally met hers, cold and unblinking. "Best you shop somewhere else. Maybe in towns that appreciate your kind." Her kind. The words struck deeper than she'd let show. She left without a word, her pride intact but her spirit bruised. Outside, the sky was pale and wide, offering no comfort. She wandered, unsure what she was even looking for. Work, forgiveness, a miracle. By late afternoon, Elena returned to her cabin on the edge of town. The sun spilled long shadows across the dry land, and the wind hissed through brittle brush. She set down her basket, empty, and reached for the door. A slip of paper had been wedged between the planks. She unfolded it slowly. Neat, small handwriting. 4 simple words. Don't let them win. No signature, no clue, but the message pulsed with quiet strength. She looked around, heart quickening, but saw no one. Was it the boy who waved from the window, someone from church, secretly regretful, or the man from the saloon? She hadn't forgotten him, tall, still, dangerous in his calm. He hadn't spoken, but he had seen her, really seen her. There was something in the way he watched, not with judgment, but with understanding, as if he recognized a wound in her because he had one too. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. The cabin felt smaller than usual, like the walls were pressing inward. She sat by the window, the slip of paper in her hand staring into the dark. She thought of her parents, both gone now, who'd raised her to believe knowledge was a blessing, not a curse. She thought of the girls in her classroom who'd whispered dreams of exploring mountains and reading Latin, and she thought of the town that tried to silence her for daring to light a spark. The next morning she pinned the note beside her mirror. Her eyes were tired, but a flame remained. They hadn't broken her, not yet. And somewhere in a room above the saloon, the quiet stranger watched the sunrise without blinking. His name wasn't known to her, but she had already carved a space in his thoughts, because he too had once been told he was something to be feared, and he had learned what it meant to be punished for what you couldn't change. He rode into Dustmere on a horse black as night, carrying no saddlebag and offering no name. Dust clung to his coat, and the silver buckle on his belt bore the faint scratches of another man's initials. Some said he came from the mountains. Others whispered he'd been part of the war no one talked about. All they really knew was this: he didn't speak unless necessary, and he never looked afraid. The townsfolk called him that one-eyed devil at first, not because he lacked an eye, but because he wore a permanent squint in one of them. A scar slicing through his brow like a knife had left its memory behind. His name, when someone finally dared to ask, was Ronan Black. No last name, no history. The saloon offered him a room without questions. The blacksmith offered him work shoeing horses. Strong hands were always needed, even if they belonged to dangerous men. He worked hard, took his pay, drank little, spoke less. But every evening, after the fires dimmed and the gamblers stumbled out into the dust, Ronan Black would sit by the window of his upstairs room and read a worn, leather-bound book. No one knew what it was, only that it had pages nearly falling out and foreign words scrawled along the edges. One night, Elena saw him from a distance. She was walking home, arms full of kindling, when she looked up and caught the glow of a lamp and the silhouette of a man hunched over a book. She stopped. Something about the stillness of him, the way his hand hovered gently over the pages, struck her. She wasn't used to seeing men like him, men built like danger, cradle a book, like something holy. The next day, trouble found her again. Two cowhands, half drunk and itching for sport, cornered her behind the bakery. One grabbed her arm, the other made a joke about smart mouths needing quiet hands. She fought back, hit one hard enough to draw blood, but they only laughed. Then a shadow fell over them. Ronan Black stood there, arms loose at his sides, eyes like chipped stone. He didn't say a word. The cowhands didn't laugh after that. One tried to make a joke, we was just talking friend, but Ronan Black didn't blink. His presence alone shifted the air. Without drawing his gun, without making a threat, he made them retreat. They muttered curses and backed away. Elena stood, shaken but unbroken. She met his eyes. "Thank you," she said, brushing dirt from her skirt. He nodded once, turned and walked away. No heroic words, no swagger, just silence, and the echo of footsteps leaving deeper prints than any man had left before. That night she found another note on her doorstep. Just one word this time. Careful, no signature, no explanation, but she didn't need one. By the end of that week, everyone in Dustmere knew the name Ronan Black, not because he introduced himself. He never did, but because after what he did behind the bakery, even the loudest mouths had gone quiet. The cowhands refused to say what exactly happened. All they'd mutter was, "That man's not right. He don't talk, but he listens and he sees too much." Elena, too, began hearing his name in the same breath as trouble. The sheriff warned her, "You ought to keep your distance from that one. Rumor is he once gunned down a marshal in Kansas." Elena arched an eyebrow. Was the marshal innocent? The sheriff scowled, not answering. That was the thing about Dustmere. They feared what they didn't control, and no one controlled Ronan Black. He kept to himself mostly, worked at the forge during the day, sweat soaking through his shirt as he hammered metal into shape. At night he'd be back at that upstairs window, reading the same tattered book, always alone, always still. But Elena saw more. She saw how he lingered near the schoolhouse ruins, where her chalkboard had been, shattered and her books burned. She noticed how he paused outside her cabin some nights, never knocking, just watching, not in a way that frightened her, in a way that made her feel seen. So one evening, when she caught him behind the church reading beneath the awning, she approached. "French," she said, nodding at the open page in his lap. "That's Les Miserables." Ronan Black didn't look up. "You read it?" "Twice," she replied, then sat down beside him without asking. "You don't strike me as the literary type." He closed the book slowly. "People aren't always what they strike you as." His voice was low, gravelly, and it surprised her more than his silence ever had. Not because it was harsh, but because it was careful, like every word had weight. She studied him now, not as the town's shadow but as a man. His hands were rough, scarred. His jaw carried the memory of more than one fight. But his eyes, they weren't cruel. They were tired, deep tired, like he'd lived too many lifetimes in too short a span. "Where'd you learn to read French?" she asked. He hesitated. "My mother." Elena smiled. "Mine too." That was it. No dramatic confessions. No sparks flying. Just two people sitting in the quiet, sharing the rare warmth of understanding. In Dustmere, that was more intimate than any kiss. When she left him that night, she didn't feel alone. And for the first time since arriving, Ronan Black didn't return to his room right away. He stood under the stars for a long time, the book in hand, thumb tracing the worn leather cover. His mother's name, faintly etched on the first page, barely visible now. She had taught him to read, to love words, to love silence. She had died for both. The air in Dustmere thickened like a storm waiting to break. Whispers traveled faster than the wind. About Elena, about Ronan Black, about the way they were seen together behind the church. No one spoke to them directly, but doors slammed harder, and stairs lingered longer. One night, Elena awoke to the smell of smoke. Not from her cabin, thank God, but close, too close. She ran outside barefoot, her nightdress catching the breeze. A small bundle of firewood near her porch was aflame, and the flames licked dangerously at the corner of her steps. Someone had set it. She grabbed her water pail, heart racing, and doused the fire. The embers hissed, smoke curling into the sky like a serpent. Then she saw the mark, crude letter, W, scrawled in the dirt beside her door. A warning. Someone in town wanted her gone, and this time they weren't hiding behind words. The next morning, Ronan Black showed up at her cabin without knocking. He didn't speak, just walked the perimeter, inspecting tracks, the burned spot, the message. When he finally looked at her, his expression was stone. "Whose mark is that?" he asked. Elena hesitated. "The Wilkins boys. Their father runs the grain mill. They're easily led." He nodded once. "They won't do it again." Ronan Black. "Wait." But he was already walking away. Hours later, word spread through town that two of the Wilkins boys had been found tied to a tree outside the church. Mouths gagged, shirts inside out, and the word cowards painted across their backs in red dye. No one saw who did it. No one asked. The town split in two. Some whispered that Ronan Black had gone too far. Others muttered. About time someone stood up to those boys. Mayor Halbridge, furious, called for an emergency meeting. "She's turning our town upside down, first with books, now with violence. This ends now." They couldn't prove it was Ronan Black, of course, but they didn't need proof. They only needed someone to blame. That night, Elena found Ronan Black behind the saloon. He was sharpening a blade, the moonlight glinting off steel. "You can't fight the whole town," she said softly. "I'm not fighting them," he answered. "I'm reminding them there are lines. You scare them." He paused. "Good." She stepped closer. "You're not just doing this for me, are you?" He met her eyes. There was no answer in his lips, but plenty in the silence. He turned and handed her something wrapped in cloth. A book. She unwrapped it slowly. Her breath caught. It was a copy of Lamaro Diable, her mother's favorite. She hadn't seen it since the schoolhouse burned. "Where did you?" "Found it behind the pulpit," he said simply. "Someone must have hidden it." She clutched it like a relic. "Thank you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he turned to go. But this time he stopped halfway and said without looking back, "They won't burn you again." The sheriff came to her door just after dawn, his boots heavy on the steps, his face pulled tight like an old leather strap. Elena met him outside, arms crossed, the early chill catching her breath. "I'm here, as a courtesy," he said, eyes scanning the horizon like he couldn't bear to look at her directly. "But you and I both know things are getting out of hand." Elena's jaw tensed. "Because someone tried to burn my cabin," he sighed. "Because this town ain't built for change. You've been stirring dust since the day you opened that school, and now you got Ronan Black out here, doing God knows what. So punish the ones starting the fires, not the woman trying to survive. Them." The sheriff took off his hat and rubbed his temple. "Elena, listen to me. You got a smart head on your shoulders. Too smart to end up with your name scratched onto a gravestone because you couldn't take a hint. Her lips pressed into a line. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying you got till the next full moon to be on your way. Quietly. No trouble. I ain't proud of it. But I'd rather see you leave alive than buried proud. He put his hat back on, nodded once, and walked away. She stood there long after he disappeared, the wind tugging at the hem of her dress, the ultimatum ringing louder than any church bell. That night she didn't light her candle. She sat in the dark, the sheriff's words echoing in her chest, like gunshots. A knock came at the door. Elena opened it to find no one there, but a folded note rested on her step. If you go, they win. I won't let that happen. No signature, but she knew the handwriting now. Strong, deliberate strokes. The same calm behind the chaos. She clutched the note to her chest and stared out at the trees, her thoughts spinning. Was it foolish to stay, reckless, or was it finally her moment to stand where others had fled? She found Ronan Black by the stables the next day, cleaning a rifle, with quiet precision. They gave me a deadline, she said. He didn't look up. Then we beat the clock. I don't want to be saved, she said, voice shaking. I want to be believed in. He met her eyes at last. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. A breath caught in her throat. I used to think I'd never find someone who didn't flinch when I spoke, she whispered. That being smart made me unlovable. He stepped closer, just enough for her to feel his shadow stretch over her. You're not unlovable, he said, his voice like gravel and rain. You shine too bright for dim hearts to hold. She blinked hard. You've got a way with words for someone who barely uses them. He offered a rare smirk. Only say what matters. For a heartbeat they stood still. Two exiles clinging to the edge of a town that had never deserved them. Then she turned and walked away, her heart hammering with something dangerously close to hope. And Ronan Black, watching her silhouette disappear into the light, made himself a promise. If this town tried to silence her again, they'd hear his answer, loud and clear. The sun hung low like an open wound in the sky, bleeding its last light over Ash Hollow. Shadows stretched long across the town, and with them danger crept closer. Elena knew something was wrong before she heard the footsteps. She'd stayed late at the chapel, organizing what books had been salvaged from the fire. Pages curled and scorched, but not defeated. As she stepped outside, the air turned still. The town square, usually filled with quiet murmurs, was silent. Too silent. Then came the voice behind her. Well, if it ain't the schoolmarm who thinks she's better than the rest of us. She turned slowly. It was Clay Grafton, the mayor's son. He stood with his thumbs tucked into his belt. A sick grin spread across his face. Two of his friends flanked him, drunk, mean and bored. You think you can hide behind books and big words, Clay sneered. Behind your pet killer. Elena took a step back. I don't want trouble, Clay. Too late for that, he lunged. She screamed, stumbling as his hand grabbed her wrist, yanking her into the dirt behind the chapel. His friends laughed, circling like vultures. Elena clawed at his face, kicked, fought like a wild thing. But he was stronger. Then came the sound. A single shot. Clay's body collapsed forward, limp, heavy. Silence, shock. The second man turned to run. Another shot. He fell before he could reach the alley's mouth. The third man froze, eyes wide, hands in the air. Go, came the voice behind him. Low, cold, final. He ran. Elena sat up, breath ragged, hands shaking as she stared at the two bodies bleeding into the dust. Ronan Black stood a few feet away, gun still smoking in his hand, face unreadable in the dying light. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched her. And for a moment, no one existed but them. Then the bells rang, doors opened, voices shouted. By the time the sheriff arrived, the crowd had gathered, faces pale, mouths open. The mayor pushed through, falling to his knees beside his son's body, howling like a man possessed. Arrest him, he roared. He's a murderer. Ronan Black said nothing. He didn't resist as they took his gun, clapped iron around his wrists, led him through the street like a criminal. Elena stood in their path. Wait, she said, voice shaking but strong. Clay attacked me, he would've. No one asked you, the mayor snapped. You brought this devil here, the crowd murmured, torn between horror and silence. The sheriff looked down. We'll sort it in court. As they dragged Ronan Black away, Elena caught one last look at his face. No fear, no regret, only one truth in his eyes. He had killed for her, and he would do it again. The courthouse in Dustmere hadn't seen a real trial in years. It smelled of old wood and older grudges, with pew-like benches filled to bursting. The whole town came, not for justice, but but for spectacle. Ronan Black stood at the center, hands bound, expression unreadable. He hadn't spoken a word since the arrest. Not to the sheriff, not to Elena, not to the judge who rode in from Cheyenne to preside with impartiality. Elena sat behind him, flanked by whispers and cold stares. The mayor, red-eyed and trembling, took the stand first. His voice cracked as he spoke of his son, a flawed boy but no monster, and of how Ronan Black had executed him like an outlaw. No one mentioned what Clay had done. When it was Elena's turn, she stood alone before the room, spine straight, voice clear. Clay Grafton tried to hurt me. He would have. Her breath caught, but she didn't flinch. He would have taken everything from me. And if Ronan Black hadn't stopped him, I might not be standing here at all. Laughter from someone in the back. She's making it up, someone muttered. She wanted it. That's what women like her do. Too clever for her own good. Too proud. Elena ignored them. This trial isn't about justice. It's about punishing those who don't fit in. The judge banged the gavel. That's enough. She stepped down. The defense called no witnesses. Ronan Black refused counsel. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, hungry for a final blow. Then just before the verdict was read, a boy stood up near the back, small, pale, shaking. It was Micah, the same boy who used to sit in Elena's classroom front row. I saw what happened, he stammered. I was hiding by the chapel. His mother tried to pull him down. The judge ordered silence. I saw Mr. Grafton grab her. She screamed. The other men held her down. Then that man, he pointed to Ronan Black. He came out of nowhere. He saved her. Gasps. A ripple of unease spread through the room. The mayor stood. He's a child. Scared. Confused. But then came the sound of paper rustling. The sheriff, jaw tight, held up a folded note. We found this in Clay's coat. A letter, written days before he died. He read aloud. She makes me feel like a fool. Like I'm nothing. I'll teach her respect. She won't laugh at me again. The judge sat back slowly. The gavel dropped. Case dismissed. Charges dropped. The room erupted. The mayor cursed. The townspeople shouted. But the law had spoken. Ronan Black stood still, as if the chains still bound him. Elena moved toward him, but before she could speak, he was already walking out the door back into the sunlight, leaving behind the courthouse, the crowd, and a silence heavier than any sentence. Dustmere changed after the trial, but not in the way Elena had hoped. The townsfolk didn't apologize. They didn't meet her eyes. They simply went back to their routines with tighter lips and deeper frowns, as if the truth had wounded them more than the lie ever had. The mayor buried his son in a private ceremony. No sermon, no visitors. His house became a fortress. The church bells rang low and bitter. Elena returned to her cabin that same night. She expected Ronan Black to come. He didn't. For days, she saw no trace of him. The room at the saloon stood empty. The forge was cold. It was as if he had vanished into the dust that brought him. Then on the fourth morning, she found him at the edge of town, saddling his horse beneath a dying cottonwood. You're leaving, she said. He didn't turn. You're safe now. That's not why I need you. He paused, his hands stilled on the leather straps. You don't need me, Elena, you never did. That's not true. He looked up then, really looked. The scar across his brow caught the light. His eyes held the kind of sorrow that only men who had been broken more than once could carry. They'll never forgive you for surviving, he said. And they'll never forgive me for helping you do it. You think running fixes that? I think staying makes it worse. She stepped closer. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I thought maybe we weren't just surviving anymore. I thought maybe we were building something. He said nothing. She reached into her coat and pulled out the old book, Les Miserables, the one he used to read by candlelight. She held it out. He didn't take it. You gave me a reason to believe again, she whispered. In something more than fear. In something quiet. Something true. He looked away. Then, almost too soft to hear, he murmured. They told you smart women don't get chosen, but they were wrong. But they were wrong. Her breath caught. You're the only soul I've ever trusted to see mine clearly, he said. And the only heart I ever wanted near mine. Elena reached for him, but he stepped back. If I stay, they'll come after me again. And next time you'll be the one who pays the price. She shook her head. Let me decide that. But he was already mounting his horse. Before he rode off, he pulled something from his coat. A book wrapped in cloth. Her name was written inside, next to his, in careful ink. A gift. A goodbye. Then he was gone. No kiss. No promise. Just hoofbeats fading into the wind. Elena stood there long after the dust had settled. The book pressed against her chest. Her heart broken but not defeated. Not this time. The weeks that followed passed like a slow turning of pages in a book. No one wanted to finish. Elena stayed, even when people whispered behind her back, even when they crossed the street to avoid her, even when the church subtly stopped inviting her to Sunday services. She stayed. She rebuilt the schoolhouse alone, plank by plank, desk by desk. It was smaller now, more modest, but it had heart. A few brave mothers let their daughters return, and slowly, one by one, more came. They came with hunger in their eyes, not for food, but for something they'd never been taught to want. Permission to think. Elena taught them to read, to reason, to wonder. She taught them that intelligence was not something to fear, but something to cherish. And in the quiet moments when the sun filtered through cracked windows and pages turned under small fingers, she felt purpose again. But her heart, that was another matter. At night, she'd sit by the window and trace her fingers over the name. Inside the book Ronan Black had left her. His handwriting was careful, his silence had been loud and his absence louder still. Some nights she dreamed of him riding back through the valley. Other nights she'd wake suddenly, half expecting to hear his boots on the porch. But the wind would answer instead, empty and cold. Until one day the wind changed. It came with the scent of rain, rare and sweet. The sky swelled dark and moody, and thunder rolled low in the distance. Elena was locking up the schoolhouse when she saw it. A lone rider on the ridge. At first she thought it was another drifter, someone passing through like so many others. But then the horse crested the hill and she saw the coat, the black duster, the shadowed face beneath a familiar hat. Her chest tightened so much she forgot how to breathe. Her knees almost He didn't gallop, he didn't rush. He rode slow, steady, straight toward her. When he dismounted, he didn't speak. He didn't have to. She stepped forward, her heart slamming against her ribs, tears already filling her eyes. "Why now?" she whispered. Ronan Black removed his hat, holding it at his chest like a prayer. The scar above his brow was still there, but something in his face had softened. A quiet peace. A man who had chosen something over fear. He reached into his coat and pulled out a slip of paper. It wasn't a letter, it was a marriage license, already signed. Her name, his. She stared at it, then back at him. He didn't smile, he didn't explain. He just looked at her the way no one else ever had. With respect, with hope, with complete wordless love. Elena laughed through her tears. "You still don't talk much, do you?" He stepped closer, and in the rain that had finally begun to fall, he touched her cheek with the gentleness of someone who had spent a lifetime breaking things, and had finally learned how to hold something precious. She leaned into him, and he kissed her, not like a gunslinger, not like a man with a past, but like someone who had finally come home. Dustmere never quite accepted Elena, or Ronan Black, but it didn't matter. Because some stories don't need applause to be true. Some loves don't need permission to endure. They said she was too smart to ever be loved. They were wrong, because a man with no words once killed to protect her. And when the time came to speak, he did it the only way. He knew how. He came back. This story is more than one woman and one man, a feared gunslinger, or a woman too smart for her time. It's about the kind of love that doesn't need words to be heard, the kind that sees who you truly are and stays anyway. Have you ever felt like you were too much for someone to love? Or have you ever found someone who embraced the parts of you others couldn't understand? Share your truth below. Your story matters and someone out there may need to hear it today. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes love can be quiet and still powerful.